Hi, everybody. Welcome to Amigos. I'm John.
And I'm Aaron.
And today, Aaron, we're talking about It Came from the Desert.
Ooh,
Now,
scary.
Aaron, I'll tell you something else that comes from the desert.
What?
The Boatfest Vintage Computer Exhibition.
That
It's
comes from the
straight out of the
desert?
desert. Well,
How do you
yeah.
figure?
Well, the computing really as it stands today, was forged in the desert of the Southwest American state of New Mexico.
How do you I got to hear this.
Well, I mean, I thought everybody knew it. When the crash happened in Roswell, it was no coincidence that that's when all of the technology really started humming. They took all of that alien technology and they made the Osborne personal computer. And that's how we got here.
Huh. And who knew? I bet those guys would be stunned to realize where that got them.
Yeah,
Downtown Hurricane for
that's
Boat
right.
Fest.
That's right. So, if you want to celebrate the legacy of extraterrestrial technology, you can come out to Hurricane next week on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, the 14th, 15th, and 16th, in downtown Hurricane, West Virginia, at the social event space. And we are going to put on a show to end all shows. We've got close to 40 attendees, who the majority of which are going to be bringing their own personal computers. We're going to have lots of talks. We're going to have a repair table set up from Frank and his boys at Retro Rewind. We're going to have live recordings of Amigos, ARG Presents, and the Sprite Castle. Speaking of which, should I tell you that Jack Flack is coming? That's right, folks. Jack Flack, infamous YouTuber to the stars, van life connoisseur. He is going to be there. He's going to be driving the van. If you've been watching Big Rob's van all this time and telling yourself, man, if only I could set foot inside that hallowed space, Flack will let you for $20.
Is that?
So
Did you
you
clear
can
that with Flag?
you can come on out. You can get your tickets at boatfest.info. Aaron, what are you most looking forward to about Boatfest this year?
Oh boy. Well, it's always great to see all my buddies. So I mean, listen, it's a pat answer, but it's true. These guys, I get to see them like once a year, maybe once every, maybe twice, but most of the time once, especially if the fellows that are coming from across the pond or from Canada. So it's always great to see all of the good people that we know from the show, and then and other shows too. It's I mean, that's always nice. And then on top of that, I just like to see all the cool stuff. And it's a weekend where I get to sit down and play a bunch of cool games. I mean, for me, I love it. I talk about a lot of these crazy systems and stuff on ARG, and me and you talk about a bunch of stuff on the Amiga and all the stuff we've talked about in the ZX and whatnot. But it's one thing to talk about it, but when you get to actually sit down and fool with a BBC Master or a Naboo or one of these insane Mobius Super Amigas. I mean, where are you going to get to play that stuff, or some kind of prototype thing that Cole would bring? I mean, there's any number of people. I mean, we got to play the ZX Next, which we never would have played with the big Amigas that the Lord brings down. We never would have got to play with that stuff any other time. So there's always some crazy stuff there that's fun to try out. And everyone's always in like a real cool mood. It's a very chill event. There's some good eating, and the
Yeah.
last year the auction was real fun. I'm looking forward to that again this year. So really, I'm looking for the whole event, but it'll be fun just to see all my old buddies and meet some new people because we've got some people coming that I've not yet got to meet. So that'll be fun too, Bud.
Yeah,
What
and
about you?
if you're unable to attend, of course, we are going to be streaming the whole thing right here on Twitch, twitch.tv/Amigos Podcast or Amigos Retro Gaming. I don't know, whatever our channel's called. And you can check out boatfest.info to get your tickets. Only $30 for the weekend.
Yeah,
I'm looking forward most to the non-video game activities. There's going to be some Subbuteo played. There's
yeah,
going to be some Quest for the Rings played.
yeah.
There's going to be, I believe that there going to be some, possibly even some VCR board games that are going to be there. So I'm looking forward to all of that stuff, and of course, sitting down and playing, like you said, all of the exotic video game systems. Look at that beautiful man on the screen.
That's a good shot of
Uh,
your your back of your bald head right there. It was
right.
lovely.
And so but the biggest thing is that it's the camaraderie, it's the community. We spend all year talking nonstop on Discord to all these guys, and
Yeah.
this is the one time of the year where we can all get together and just chill and have a good time. We always have good dinners. We're going to Thai Fusion this year. We're going back to Whiskey Taco. Gonna have a
That's
good
the
time.
ultimate shot of L. Curtis Boyle right there
That
in
needs
the
to be on his
3D
driver's
glasses.
license. That's great. And finally, we're going to wrap things up with the newest part. That was after I had taken a little bit, I think. This is and so
This is the best video I've ever seen.
you can check out all the info out, and also if you're listening on the radio, you can watch these videos on YouTube. You can see all the recaps from years past. We're gonna have a great time, man. Look how lovely that table looks. Brent with the gavel of doom there. We're gonna have fun at Boatfest. We hope you will join us. We know many of you will, and of course, 2 weeks after that, we're taking Boatfest on the road, sort of, and it will repeat itself again in UK form at Kickstart. But if you're not lucky enough to live in the U of K, then you can come to the Hurricane of Ken and come to Boatfest.
Are they going to be streaming the big show over there at Ravi's show?
I'm not exactly sure what the streaming setup is like. Ravi was talking about he's got all of the studio equipment is pro level, but he's not sure what the
Ooh.
streaming setup is going to be like. So it may be one of these things that a lot of things are recorded in advance and released over time. I know I'm going to be recording several interviews and releasing them over the month of July for our patrons as sort of a special treat. But I'm not sure. You'll just have to tune in and keep watch over at amigashow.com to see what's going to be streamed as far as Kickstart goes.
And
And
you're going to be
Mitsubishi, they
taping.
did stream last year, so I would say there's a good chance they will stream it this year.
You're going to be taping whatever Amigos you do over there, presumably.
Oh yeah, that will definitely. Everything's going to be recorded. It's just a question of whether it will be streamed or not.
You know, one thing that video if you're listening to radio, I'm going to try to explain this to you. It was a big room full of older guys looking at old computers, Boatfest, having a good time. Some younger guys in there, some full heads of hair, but other bald types like myself in the boat. But one thing, I was looking through old Boatfest for the game this week because this is famously a game we played on not Boatfest but Amigathon, and I noticed something. I just double noticed it when we played that video. There's a lot of like shots of us from angles where you can see our legs, and that's never good. That should be one of the things we're gonna do is get long tablecloths for this year because there's a lot of that going on. And back in the day when we first started, I watched the very first episode we ever did in video, and there's a reason, and I'll get into it. And let me tell you something. Those first few episodes, we just had no idea what we were doing.
Rough.
We were just
Rough.
and how many times during the filming this at your house where we just splayed out for the world to see during Amigathon? We promise we won't do that at Boatfest. I guarantee it.
Aaron, let's talk about It Came from the Desert.
Oh, I'm ready, buddy.
The desert, unchanged for millions of years, yet witness to a biblical prophecy come true that one day the meek shall inherit the earth.
A great opening right there.
Yeah.
I mean, say what you will about the game, but that opening is enticing. It makes you
One of
want
the
to play
best.
it. You know, we were just talking about Boatfest, and I want to show you right here. If you're watching at home, I'm holding up It Came from the Desert. I've actually got this game, sort of, the box version here. Believe it or not, I bought this last year at Boatfest from Pockbilly. This is the PC version. It's funny when I looked at and we'll talk about it when we get to how much this thing costs. But it's a beautiful box.
Yeah.
I just love it. Cinemaware really did a good job with the box art and stuff. They really gave you the feel for that sort of 50s monster movie on the cover of this boat. I wanted to talk before we got into this boat, and I mentioned it a little bit earlier, and we were in the intro. Um, this is one of our flashback games or look back games, and the reason is, and I never really appreciated these until I went back to watch our episode on this, because this is the very first episode we did, as I mentioned, with video, and it is an abomination. I mean, it looks like this was shot through the lens of someone that had cataracts. I mean, it's a disaster. We were, I remember this because Boat had put out the green screen, and I had no idea what we were doing. He never tells me, and so I just walked in, and he's like, "Look, I got this green screen. We're gonna be shooting video." I'm like, "What? What the heck?" It was episode 47, Boat. So we'd already been doing this for almost a year, and then you decided it was time to get video on the show, and it was this game that we ended up covering. And as I looked back on it, I couldn't even watch it. It was so horrible. I was like, I can't even watch this thing. I just couldn't do it. So I'm glad we're touching on it again.
One of the
all these years
things I
later.
believe that when we recorded that first episode, I don't think I knew how to integrate other windows. Like I didn't overlay. There was no video of the game.
No,
Just
we had a
us sitting at
backdrop.
the
That was
table.
it.
Yeah.
And we both had the stupidest look on our faces. You've changed a little bit since those days, but you had
have
this.
too.
No, but I mean, you had this innocent grin. I mean, you looked like a wee little child up there. Like you were the cat that got the canary. And I just looked like a guy who was too fat to be shot in video. And so being out of focus for me was actually an advantage. But that was the only one.
There were a lot of technical issues that took a while to overcome. And but I will say that it did get the video ball rolling, and it led us to where we are today.
Yeah, for better or for worse, it sure did. So let's talk about this very famous game. It came from the desert, a 1989 release from the geniuses or maniacs, depending on your perspective, or at Cinemaware. This one was coded by a couple fellows, Randy Platt, who worked on a slew of Cinemaware titles, Antheads, Rocket Ranger, Wings, TV Sports Football. The other coder, Tom McWilliams, worked on everything that the first guy did except for Wings. The graphics on this, the brilliant graphics, Jeffrey Hibners, who worked on Antheads, Rocket Ranger, Wings, TV Sports Football. Jeff Godfrey, who worked on TV Sports Boxing, or ABC Boxing, depending on what you saw, and Antheads, Rocket Ranger, Wings, TV Sports Football, and Lord of the Rising Sun. And in the music in this, Jim Simmons, who did Antheads and TV Sports Basketball, and Gregory Haggard, who worked on Antheads and Wings. So these guys are pretty much all working on in-house stuff for the most part back in the day. This is an OCS joint, 3 discs, and was released at a time in '89 where I would say this was the era where the Amiga as a platform for games had really started to hit its stride, Bo. Wouldn't you agree with that assessment?
Absolutely. '89 was the year.
Yeah. And so what you've got here then, Cinemaware, who always like to, let's say, push the envelope. In some ways they did, in some ways they didn't. And I think this game, if you were going to pick a game that was the most Cinemaware-iest of the Cinemaware games, it would probably be this game, in my opinion. Because this game, it's funny, we covered King of Chicago a while back, and we've covered several other of their Cinemaware games. We've covered
We've
Wings,
done almost all of them at this point.
Yeah, TV Sports Basketball, and Rocket Ranger way back. And the games follow a pattern. And this game follows a similar pattern, but you could tell that they had learned a few things by the time this one came around. And ultimately, this would be leading up to one of their best works, which was Wings. So they learned, at least they did learn as they went. I mean, more or less. What's to say about this game? I guess you would call this a narrative-driven, I guess it was like you don't really want to call it an action game. It's a hybrid. How would you explain this, Boat, to somebody if you had to?
This is a hybrid visual novel / action game.
Yeah, I agree with this one. Now, when this first comes up, you do see the intro we played the audio part of, which is a beautiful parallax, moving, scrolling scene of the desert, and a meteor comes crashing down, and with that guy talking over it. when you first saw this opening boat and this game first hones into view, what were your initial thoughts?
I was excited. I thought, man, this is going to be great because the intro is amazing. It looks so good. It easily beats out any other introduction I've seen from an Amiga game from 1989 or before. I mean, I can't think of another game that looked as good as this game does right off the bat. So I was excited. And then, you know, you come in and you're when you first start the game, you're at your place and you're talking to various people. You've got all these different options. You really feel like the game is going to lead you somewhere. You're like, okay, I've got these samples, I've got choices that I can make, and so I was pretty excited when I fired this up for the first time.
Yeah, I would concur with that. Now, so in this game, you play the role of a geologist, Dr. Greg Bradley, who is in a town called Lizard Breath, California, and it's 1951. And he is there to study meteor crash sites, and then while he's there, a meteor actually hits. So it's serendipitous that he's there. And what ensues are the real-time adventures of Dr. Bradley as he goes through this town, gathering clues and slowly uncovering the overarching mystery that is affecting the entire town and ultimately could affect the entire Earth. If you've ever seen a classic monster movie called Them, which is often referenced as the source of this, and I can understand why, where giant ants start taking over. I mean,
giant ants, eh?
Yeah, giant ants. Yeah, it's you can see slight similarities, both.
Yeah.
In this, in fact, even the way you hurt the ants in that, shooting off their antenna. This game is most of this game is a conversational game, sort of not totally unlike King of Chicago, where you are picking branching conversations and making choices to and exploring this town. There's a map screen that you have access to that will give you all the available locations in the town, and the game takes place in real time ish. And so what that means is you'll sleep. You'll do stuff at 6 p.m. on Tuesday. You'll have appointments
Stores have
to be
opening
in
and
places.
closing hours. You know, locations. There are some places you just can't go at certain times.
Exactly, Bo. Exactly. And some people will show up at certain times, and some people will show up after you do certain things. So this was a pretty advanced game in terms of how they operated it. I mean, again, I look back at King of Chicago. Because we had the inside story on that, and that was a game that also that your choices would affect things later on in the game, and this is sort of like that. Of course, this is more of a sprawling game than that was, because in that one you pretty much were just in conversations. There were some mini games. There is some actually. The more I think of it, there's a lot in common with it, but it's this game seems.
I would say King of Chicago is a direct successor to It Came from the Desert.
Well, no, it predated this though. So
the other way around then.
Yeah,
the other way around.
Yeah, and I think I loved King. I think there are a few things that King of Chicago does better because the conversations in it are pretty amusing, and there's so many endings and so many things that could happen to you in it. But I think this is a more fleshed out, more friendly, more interesting game because you're seeing this whole town. You're slowly seeing this mystery unfold. You're getting clues. So how do you get those clues? Well, I've been talking. What do they do in this? What can you do when you get up out of bed in this game?
Well, we should talk about what you actually do in this game and what the point is. Okay. So in this game, you have 15 days to prevent a ant-driven disaster where the ants are going to overrun this town. That
happened to me at Mud Mountain, by the way. I had an ant-driven disaster up there, and they won ultimately.
That's why you had to move.
Yeah.
And so so what do you do? Well, you have to convince the people that bad things are happening. This is in the grand tradition of movies like this everywhere, where you are the person that sees what's going on. People are dying left and right, yet no one will accept the truth that something supernatural or something, extra earthly is going on. Okay. And so how do you do that? Well, you do it all through different interactions with characters. So as you talk to characters and as you visit places, you collect evidence. You may collect tracks from the creature. You may collect recordings of creature sounds. There are unspecified fluids that you can correct, or you can collect,
Ant
or you can,
juice.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And you can collect creature parts. So you do this, and then you take these samples to various other characters in the game, and they can analyze it. Sometimes the evidence is true, and sometimes the evidence is false. And so once you get enough conclusive evidence, you contact the mayor, and the mayor says, okay, I believe you. And then the game shifts into like a combat simulator, an overhead view combat simulator, where you actually control the movement of various different types of troops to beat off the ant invasion once and for all. That's sort of the game in a nutshell.
Yeah, and what makes which that's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
That right just, there's more. There's also, because this is like life. So what else is going on? There's a potential love story in this. There's a couple. There's a gangster thing in here where you're involved with the mob. There's of course you've got to have some mini games to break it up because it's a Cinemaware. So in this game, there's a knife fighting game. There's a game where you play chicken. There's a game where you fly around with an airplane and try to gas the ants. There's a game where you are trying to shoot the ants. There's a game where you're running from ants and you're throwing grenades at them. You know, there are little games in here sprinkled in. Sometimes they just come up and they don't have a ton. Unless you die, they don't have a ton or get hurt. They don't have a ton of bearing on the story. But often they if you successfully complete them or survive, like, it helps because like Boat said, you're on the clock. It sounds like 15 days is a lot of time. It's not. It goes pretty quick, depending on what you're up to. And there's a ton of places to visit in this. You've got bars. You've got radio stations. You've got labs. You've got newspaper offices. You've got town halls. You've got the city streets. You've got your house. You've got the movie theater, and you've got the airport. You've got the military base. There's a ton of stuff to go do, and you're eventually going to see all this stuff. The mines. There's several mines that you go visit, and and farms, and you're talking to all these people. When the game starts up, for example, they found a cow that's been beheaded. And that's a mystery. That's the mystery at the time. It's not the ants. Like, how did this cow lose its head? There's a crazy dream sequence early on in this game that could be startling. At the first time I played this, I actually kind of jumped out of my seat. They got me with one of the scenes in this. I'm going to give them credit. So they fleshed out the world quite nicely, and so you get to go around. Now and there's tons of dialogue too. So I'm going to give the game its props. Right? This game, I think we could both agree with this, Boat, was well ahead of its time. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a Homer or I'm a Cinemaware guy or I'm an Amiga guy. This game was way ahead of its time. Like, this is a game that would be made now, and it would take up way more space than 3 discs. It would be massive because you could have the way the game's set up. You could have tons of dialogue trees and tons of stuff going on. So there were certain compromises they had to make, but you still get a lot of game in here, including multiple endings. It's got including bad endings, good endings, and other cute little novelties that pop up in the game. You often won't get killed in the game. You will get sent to the hospital, and when that happens, you have a choice to make. You can just stay in the hospital until you're healed, or you can try to escape the hospital, which is probably the most difficult mini game in the entire game, where you're trying to get away from the nurses to get out of that hospital. I think I did it like 1 or 2 times ever, and I've tried probably 100 times. Have you ever gotten past the hospital, Boat?
No, I got to the point where I just sort of accepted my treatment, and because I just got tired of wasting time trying to do something I couldn't do.
Yeah, and of course you're asking, well, why would you try to escape? Because when you stay in the hospital to get treated, it takes time.
Right.
And that's the key element to this. You will send stuff in the mail. You will make and receive phone calls quite often, and you can do it from any place that's got a phone. You can make a call, and so there's a lot of investigating involved. And this isn't one of those games where you can just click on every answer that's available and then just keep going. I mean, because you have to make decisions, and you also have to pick what you're going to do with your day. Because if you're going to go out to mine 2 or something, that's going to take a good chunk of the day. It's way out in the middle of the desert. If you're going to hang out at the bar, that's not going to take that long, So you've got to sort of decide where you're going to go. And after you play this for a while, and me and Bo know this because this, as we mentioned, this came up on Amigathon 2018, which is the last time we did a 24-hour Amigathon.
And the only time.
This was Big Hour 17. And this is where the wheels came off of that Amigathon because we both played 40 minutes, I believe, of this, and we were out. But as we play it, and every time I've played it since, I think about that because there's a cadence to this game that you pick up on after you've played it a few times. It's not the kind of game that you can only play once. You can play it multiple times or try different stuff, but you're going to know how to trigger certain events. How do I trigger the knife fight? How do I trigger the chicken on the road? How do I get, when's the drive-in open? How do I do that? So you'll understand that stuff. And then eventually it makes it a little bit easier to get to that part. Once you get to the sort of like what Boat mentioned was sort of like the end game, I've gotten to that part so few times that I have no idea what I'm doing. And so I've never beaten the game. Have you ever beaten this one, Boat?
What do you think?
Yes.
Hundreds of times. I've never gotten to the final situation. Never.
I usually what happens to me is the ants just start coming because eventually you get to the point where the ants are coming, hordes of them, and you see them coming and you can fight them. But if you're not to the point where have done stuff with the plane or have the military on your side, they just overrun the town, and then the game ends. And I've seen that many, many times. That's usually the way I go. So, what do you think? I mean, I think we both like the concept of this game, Boat. I think we both like the plot. What do you think of the execution, given the situation that you're using 3 floppy disks on a 1985 computer? How do you think they did? Did they pull this off?
Well, in a way, yes. In a way, this game is a remarkable achievement on the Amiga because what they've done is they've condensed or expanded, however you want to look at it, a 1950s B horror movie into a video game in a way that I don't think any video game has done before or since. This game has a mood about it. It's got when you fire it up and you're playing this game, you feel like you're part of this world in a way that very few games that I've played make you feel. A lot of that has to do with the kind of the tenor of the soundtrack. Most of the time you have this very sort of haunting motif that when you're going about your business, rolling through town. But when you go to the various locations, each one of the locations has its own little theme that plays. And that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
Like when you go into the bar, you hear the honky tonk sound. The radio station has its own tune. I thought that was great. This game is full of colorful characters that each speak to you in different ways. I think that's really cool. I like the fact that travel time is both incorporated into this game, and it's also done in such a way that you can see how long it takes you to get places. There's always an ETA. One of the things that I think would have really messed this game up is if they would have kept the travel time in, but didn't show you how long it was going to take to get to certain places. Because a lot of times in this game, you have to meet certain people at certain places at certain times. And you have to be able to plan your day around that, or else you can miss out on evidence that you need to convince the town leaders that it's time to act. So all of that is good. Okay.
Yeah.
Also, the graphics in this game are I wouldn't call them like the most stunning graphics I've ever seen in my life, apart from the intro. The intro is pretty stunning, but they're well drawn. The people look good. The people look different. I really, for a game where you're interacting with tons of different people, all of the people look different enough that you can recall who they are just by looking at them. Okay. I also like the fact that you've got different locations that you wouldn't necessarily expect, like Neptune Hall, which is sort of like a Masonic organization, a secret society.
Yeah.
I think that's cool that that's in the game, and you see that the Lord of the Neptune there and all of his regalia. I thought that was neat.
The fortune
Um,
teller along those lines.
yeah,
Thought that's kind of fun.
same thing.
It's a
And so,
quirky town.
yeah,
Yeah.
all of that stuff is great. Where this game falls apart for me is that you really don't have any idea of how far along you are in the story. You can play this game for what seems to be eons and never really feel like you're making a lot of progress. And that's a problem for me because uh, I like to know, like, I like checkpoints, both figurative and literal as I'm moving through something. And, I would have liked to have seen more indications on screen of how much evidence I've collected, how much further I need to go, who I need to convince. All of that stuff is alluded to in the manual, but I would have liked to have seen more on-screen representation. They didn't have to put it in the HUD, but I would have liked to have seen sort of like a pause screen or something like that, where I could get an idea of what I've done and what is left to do. In this game, you can waste a lot of time because 15 days, I mean, in a way, it's not very much time, but in a way, it's a really long time.
Yeah.
And if you're not careful, you want to see, this is a game that I really feel like in order to get the most out of, you really have to devote a lot of time to it, which isn't a bad thing. But like when I first fired this up again, it had been years since we'd played it. We played it in the Amigathon. I was not in a good state of mind at that point, and I didn't really give it my all. So really, the last time I really took this game seriously was way back in 2015 or 2016. And so I was like, the first thing that I want to do is just go and see all of these locations. I want to see what the game has to offer. Well, you can't always see everything all the time. So you end up going to sleep so you can wake up the next day for the thing to be open. And so by the time that you see everything, well, you've spent 2 hours playing this game, but you haven't really been playing the game. And so, you've really got to break down, okay, this is going to be the playthrough where I try and put things together. Now, that said, it's not a bad thing. This is, again, when you're writing games for these computer magazine reviews that really give you high marks for games being difficult and games taking a long time. That's not the worst thing in the world. This is a game that you really, but then you read online and other places that if you just sleep until day 7 and then do a certain sequence of events, you can beat the game.
I
And
saw
so
that. I need to
that
try that.
that
I
takes a
saw that
little bit of
mentioned.
the fun out of it. I do like the fact that there is sort of a sense of mystery. Like you said, there are certain things that you can do that will trigger events, but you have to play it for a while before you get to those. And at first, it really just seems like you're a dude trying to figure out what's going on. Really puts you in the shoes of the protagonist. The more I played this game this past week, the more I grew to really admire it in a way that it this is definitely better than Defender of the Crown. Defender of the
Oh
Crown
yeah. Oh God,
is
yeah.
is very elementary, and it's also very obscure in what you're actually trying to do. This game pulls a lot of those loose threads tighter, and it weaves a more complete experience. Like I said, that the manual definitely gives you more hints on how to control the various things. Um, None of the mini games in this game are definitely still not easy. The ant shooting mini game, I think I was able to shoot off one antenna of an ant ever. You got any tips on how to do that, Aaron?
Well, I mean, I do okay, but sometimes you just miss. I mean,
Hmm.
this game, we mentioned it was like your quintessential Cinemaware game. Those mini games are a part of it. Are the mini games better than the mini games in King of Chicago? Yes.
Yeah.
Are they better than the mini games in Rocket Ranger? Probably. There were a couple in Rocket Ranger I thought were okay, but I'd say overall these are better. Would these individual games stand up to a release? God, no. Absolutely not. Now, some of them are done to be beautiful.
Hmm.
For example, the first person view of the ant when you're holding the gun in front of you, it's gorgeous. And there's a
Right.
few scenes
Right.
like that, and you're just like, man, this is beautiful. But then you've got scenes like we're looking at a scene now where you're going into the ants' underground tunnels, like it's a speck inside of a tube. It doesn't look that great. It's okay. And there's a lot of perspective type stuff where you look real tiny and they make the ants look real cool and huge. That's fine. But I mean, it's not what I would call a fun game. Is escaping the hospital fun? Not necessarily. Is flying to plane around fun? It's okay. It's not Wings, that's for sure. Is the knife fight fun? It's a lot like the fight in Rocket Ranger. It's sort of there. It's okay. So none of these games I would consider like that much fun. Probably the most fun you could have is killing the ants out in the desert. But it makes up for that. I mean, we talk about, especially when we placed up on the Spectrum, but on the Amiga too. One of the things that's great that always drew me in, were like that when you bought a game and you didn't know where you were going. It's like a real sense of adventure, and it really dipped you into the game world, And this game does that in spades. If I'd bought this for £25 when it came out, I would be wholly satisfied with my expenditure. This is the kind of game that it aged surprisingly well given its limitations. But as a modern gamer, even as a gamer back then, you would have seen the limitations pretty quick. So at that point, you've got to ask yourselves, did I get enough action and gameplay and entertainment out of this to merit the cost? I think that's the ultimate test of this game. Because I mean, for free, it's great, and it's great for maybe a week's play. You're going to have a lot of fun with it. But I mean, are you going to go back again and again, like maybe you would Wings or something like that? Probably not. But I mean, I think given what they had to work with, they did a bang-up job. I mean, the Amiga was the lead platform on this, and you could tell it's quite a gorgeous game. And the artists that they had at Cinemaware, they had a certain panache. They had a certain style that was real awesome. And it carries into almost all their games, doesn't it, Bud? I mean, you really see a lot of real beautiful art and stylized with shading and everything. Same with the music. So, I mean, that's what Cinemaware, when you bought a Cinemaware game, that's what they brought to the table. You knew what you were getting, with a few exceptions, was going to be good looking, good sounding. And at that point, you rolled the dice to see if the game was going to be any fun. I think this one's fun, though.
I sort of disagree with your assessment.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I don't think that Wings is the end-all, be-all, greatest game that's ever been created. Like, Wings is a totally different game than this. The story in Wings plays itself. It lays itself out for you, and you play the mini-games over and over again. In this game, you're an active participant in the story that makes choices that affects how the story happens. Well, that's the big difference.
Am I saying Wings is better than this game? I think it is, but not for the reasons you might think. Wings is Cinemaware going in reverse. Wings is a game with a great narrative, but there are no visuals to come along with it. It's all in the theater of the mind with a few pictures.
You also make no narrative choices in Wings.
Right, exactly. On the flip side, it's got mini games that will stand there far better than the game. Like, it stands on its own as a game. You could have not had the narrative, put the mini games in there, you'd still had a game. Like, there's nothing in here that could do that. If only we could merge the two into some sort of super game, then we'd be in business.
This is definitely the prime example of a game being more than the sum of its parts.
Yeah,
because if you take any of the individual parts of this game and separate them out, you're not going to be left with much. But the fact that they combine both of these together, I think that you're going to get a lot more playtime out of It Came from the Desert than you would from Wings, because of all the different choices you can make as a character. Now, do I think that the mini games in this are better than the mini games in Wings? No, 1,000 times no. But this game has a lot of replayability just because of the narrative choices that you make. Not just the narrative choices, but the choices of, like, what am I going to do with my day? How am I going to approach this problem? Where do I go first? All of that stuff is good. The biggest the worst mini game I think in this game is the chicken game, because you run into that a lot.
Yeah.
And it's really not a game. You're just steering your car until it goes into the ditch or until the other guy goes into the ditch. It's no good. And so I understand that why they put it in there, because they wanted to have something that was sort of a human-based adversary rather than just the ants. But I would have rather seen the chicken game played out in an overhead perspective, not unlike when you're flying the plane. But the weird sort of 3/4 in the car perspective that is not very good.
The funny thing, when you fly that plane, you don't have a lot of real estate you can see, and so you're that's the thing where you can just fly around for a while and not see anything. I mean, this game, one thing about it, it's pretty open ended, and so
Yeah.
that could be a detriment. Like you said, you could easily waste time by not knowing what's going on. So that's, but I
Right,
mean,
but at the same time, I mean, the you have to define what you mean by waste time. Because
Yeah.
for a lot of people, when they buy a game, being able to wander around in this world and come to terms with it is not wasting time. They call that fun. So
right. But I mean,
I'm not
after
going to
you
say.
go ahead. No, go
I'm
ahead,
not going
bud.
to say that that you're not going to spend a lot of time discovering everything in the game, but it depends on what your outlook is, whether you'd count that as wasting time or not.
Right. Well, but when I say waste time, I mean basically like you're going to go into places that are not, there's nothing there or closed, or you've exhausted all your options, and then that's when you get, because you're just sort of flipping around the map. More than a few times where I'm just desperately, I don't know which direction to go. It's like, well, let's go everywhere and try to figure out what to do. That happens probably every game I've played. But I mean, still, you eventually you'll stumble upon something, and the dialogue in this is cute. It's good. It's of its era, and the all the NPCs, like you said, are wacky. That makes it a lot of fun. This was ported, Boat, to now I learned something this week. So this was ported to the PC Junior and Tandy, the DOS and the TurboGrafx. And we're going to talk about the TurboGrafx here in a minute. But this game was ported to DOS specifically to make money because they were almost bankrupt when they did that. So there was no, I guess early on they weren't going to port this to DOS, which I found interesting. Something else I found interesting was that of course Cinemaware eventually went bankrupt. It's funny, they were porting SDI to a system, which that's a surprise of all the games to go bankrupt in. And eventually, NEC owned 15% of Cinemaware, and then eventually so Cinemaware was like, we're going to port this game over to the TurboGrafx 16. I've played the TurboGrafx 16. I did a stream about it one time. It's got like live movies in it. I mean, such as they are, along with some really, I mean, real bad gameplay, real bad, Boat, unplayable garbage gameplay. And this game, effectively, and you mentioned it in your cold open. I mean, for all intents and purposes, this is the game that killed Cinemaware. I mean, don't get me wrong, they were on life support, but this finished them off. This port was unbelievably expensive when they did it, because again, they were doing stuff like getting video stuff, digitizing stuff, learning what they were doing, like trying to get acting down. And so the acting in it's abysmal, and it's just a hideous, horrible thing, laughably bad. Have you ever tried this one, Boat?
No, I've never once played a TurboGrafx 6 CD before.
Oh yeah, it's worth a look if you're easily amused by wackery. I will say, it was well received when I did it on the stream, just because it was so goofy, and it is goofy. I read that they advertised a version of It Came from the Desert for the ST that was never released. I don't know if they ever even worked on it. One would probably assume that they would. But it never got released.
That's very surprising.
Yeah, well, in '89, the ST was still fairly viable. So you know, but maybe, I don't know. I mean, maybe it couldn't pull it off. Maybe they didn't think it was worth the money. You know, who knows? Who knows why they did it? But they did what they did. It's Cinemaware's their death sort of sucked. I mean, it really sucked if you liked them, and like I did, because they did a lot of good stuff. And it's amazing to think that this came out when it did, and then you had TV Sports Basketball and Wings came out in '90. So you had some of their best games coming out, and right when they sort of figured out the formula, Boat, that's when they sort of bought the farm.
Yeah,
you know,
it's
sort of a
very
bummer.
unfortunate. Yeah, and of course we should also talk about the infamous "It Came from the Desert" film that came out in like 2018.
Yeah. We reported on that when it was being made, and even when it was announced. I've never watched it. I've seen clips of it.
I watched a review of it on YouTube.
Yeah.
And boy, stinko, not so good, Al.
I also heard it had basically zero to do with the game. So did that what the reviewer said as well?
Yeah, yeah.
So that's unfortunate. Why would you bother? And maybe just thought the name was cool, but it was. I heard it was really bad. So I looked this up to see how well it reviewed, Boater. Of course, the people at Lemon give this a big score, 8.59. The people over at Hall of Light, the lower score, 86. So those are both high scores. The magazines of the time were very receptive to this one, Boat, as you would imagine. Amiga Action scored this one 91%. Amiga Format given an 80. Amiga Joker, Boat, in a rare score for these guys. Battle down the hatches for this one. Amiga Joker in January of 90 gave this a 94%, which makes this one of the highest scores I've ever heard.
Yeah.
We may have to look to see what got the highest score ever, because it's got to be not much higher than that. The CU Amiga gave this a 96. So you can see this scored quite nicely. The average magazine rating of the day was 88%. That's incredibly high, Bode. And I will say, this is a game that if you played this when it was released, and I remember when it came out, I mean, it really was, it's a lot like a laziness game. Before you know exactly how it works, you're just baffled. How can this exist? That's what I thought about it. Did we get any Discord action, Boater?
Oh, yeah. Very popular game on the old Discord. Start out with David Hearn Ryder. He says, from the haunting intro onwards, one of the best on the Amiga, you know you're in for the treat. The movie Them may have inspired this gem of an adventure set in Lizard Breath back in the 50s. It's interactive storytelling at its best as you take on the ants. It's an adventure with a ticking clock and day-night cycles to contend with. Being at the right place at the right time is key to your success. The mini-games are a mixed bag. The hospital and ant games are fun. The knife fight and chicken games are meh. Still, it generally works and doesn't disrupt the flow of the game. Some of the characters you meet will live on in your memory long after you fail to complete the game. It's tough. The gorgeous artwork and characters, suitable music, and sampled sounds all hit the spot. Sadly, in the end, the ants ate Cinemaware out of house and home, but one can't blame the Amiga version for that. 9 out of 10, and a truly unforgettable Amiga gaming landmark. Alien Breeder writes, sometimes it's difficult to judge a 1989 game in 2024. But It Came from the Desert was an absolute marvel in 1989. The animated open and voice were amazing. And in true Cinemaware fashion, they created a cinematic adventure that blew people's minds. For those that love adventure games, graphics, and sound, this is a near 10 out of 10. Strong story, well-defined characters, and music that matches the scenes. For those that love action games, this likely looks great, but quickly falls short of expectations. Shooting the giant ants at the mine is near impossible. But to someone like me, that doesn't matter. This was the future of adventure gaming right in my 15-year-old hands. I remember this game more fondly than almost any other Amiga game. This is 920 top bananas out of 1,000.
Wow.
Ricky DeRocher writes, a cool game with a great atmosphere, but it has one major failing that makes most of the game unnecessarily and pointless. All you have to do to win is sleep until day 7, fly to the ant's nest, and then blow it up. Boom, and game over. Ultimately, this means that traveling around and talking to people is useless. Major design flaw. Pajako6502 writes, it's been a while since I put any real time into this one, but I snuck in a couple of evenings and found a game that still looks and sounds fantastic, but one that is more clunky and disjointed than I remember. The game has some flawed mechanics like the hospital. You have no reason to stay. Even if you fail to escape, you end up spending time there, so you might as well go for it. I spent a lot of time in the hospital in-game, but with Nurse Judy looking after you, why would you not? Character interaction is a bit disjointed as they have paths to follow, so you can interact with some of them for the first time much later in the game, and they will still talk to you like it's day one. And you can exploit this to finish the game early if you want to. I managed to complete the game originally, but completely oblivious to its existence of the status map in the sheriff's office that you can just call in army help later in the game. Playing with a joystick is not always the best, and I'm sure you could use the mouse, but maybe I'm misremembering. If you come at this afresh, you're probably not going to enjoy it as much as I have because it has not aged too well. But if you can get past some of the flaws and sink yourself into it, you'll find this game still has it. Capital IT.
I get it.
Out of 10. Bam. That's it, Aaron.
That's good stuff, Boater. It's funny. I'm going to have to try that sleeping gimmick. because I read that somewhere else, and I never. It's one of those things that never would have occurred to me. But some clever person who probably played this over and over just said, "Hey, what'll happen if I do this?" And it worked. So I don't think you can fault the game for that. But I mean, yeah, this, like he said, there's some clunkiness to it that becomes apparent after you play this for a while. But like, it's one of those games. It's on the surface, it's quite a looker, and there's depth to it. There's quite a bit of depth, and some of the depth you sort of add yourself as you play it. We didn't mention it, but we'll get into it just briefly. This game had a expansion disc sequel called Ant Heads, which I've never tried. Ant Heads. I don't know. Have you ever tried that one?
No.
We may have to try that. They may have to do that as a show one of these days, but because I haven't seen much about Ant Heads. I do know one thing. When I looked this up on eBay, man, I got a good deal at Boatfest. Let's put it that way. I mean, it's funny. The PC version, this isn't that expensive, but the Amiga version, it costs a ton. I saw the Amiga in-box version of this sell for $105, $156. That's just straight up money. And get this, somebody had the boxed version of Ant Heads sealed, 410 wigwams, Boat. That's 410 US dollar bill. That's big money for a game. So it must be a very rare game. But I mean, I do see it mentioned a lot, but I don't know anyone that's really sat down and played it or beat it. So it's something I definitely have to give it a shot in the future. So to sum this up, Boat, and you can take us out here. Like, where does this rank? I mean, is this one that you would like to try to get back into sometime? Is this one you play it once and you're done? What do you think?
Well, adult me does not want to play this anymore because adult me has other things that I need to.
Not that guy.
I don't have time to wonder blindly about waiting for things to happen. But kid me, and college age me that had all kinds of time, this would be something I really feel like you could lose yourself in, and that's the point of a game like this. You want to lose yourself in the experience, and this game gives you a living, breathing world that you can do that in. And to me, with a Cinemaware game, that's the ultimate praise. So this I've truly gained a new appreciation for this game after this past week spending time with it. This is near the top for me as far as Cinemaware's oeuvre.
I'm happy to hear that. I just to close this up here, I did go back and watch the video from Amigathon, and one thing I learned is never ever in any circumstances challenge a Boat to a knife fight. He's the undefeatable knife fight master.
If you ask any Amiga repair technician what the most problematic component of a motherboard is, they'll undoubtedly mention capacitors. The electrolytic capacitors that shipped with the Amiga are 30 years old or older at this point, and each one is a ticking time bomb waiting to explode battery acid all over your motherboard, sometimes damaging it irrevocably. Don't wait. Replace your capacitors now. Full capacitor kits for every Amiga model are available now at RetroRewind.ca. Don't want to attempt the repair yourself? Use their white glove recap service and leave the intricate removal and soldering process to the professionals using industry standard equipment. Use the promo code Amigos10 at checkout and save 10% off your cap kit or service. Remember, make RetroRewind.ca your first stop for all your Commodore computer needs.
Amiga News.
All right, Aaron, we're going to kick the news off this week with a new game announcement that comes to us from our buddy Neil over at Indie Retro News. This is an interesting concept for a game. It's the name of the game is Hidden Gems of Ireland. Okay. And what you do in this game, this is a metal detecting simulator. Aaron, did you ever get out with the old metal detector back in the day?
Well, you know, me and the boy have metal detectors, and we go out to up at the camp and go lumber around with them. So far, all that's happened is that the kids dug a bunch of holes. But yeah, we do occasionally partake.
I was fascinated by metal detectors when I was a kid. I was convinced that my backyard held untold treasures. And so I would go about and I would make holes in the lawn, much to my parents' chagrin, and dig up various construction materials that were discarded when my house was built. So, yeah, I'm hopeful that the Hidden Gems of Ireland, you will uncover some more valuable trinkets than that. I will say this is an interesting concept. I have not seen or heard of a game in which you play a metal detector before. Um, the producer of this game says he created this game in Backbone. And he says, why in Backbone? He says, because I don't know programming, and Backbone is a great tool for creating games.
There you
And
go.
so it's pretty cool that this guy was able to craft this experience with no programming knowledge. There are some very pretty pictures of Irish castles in this. I've only seen the one Irish castle there in Athlone. And so I may check this one out. This one might be a fun one to pull out at an Amigathon next year, Aaron.
That's real unusual. You're right. I don't know if I've never heard of this as a concept for a game. There might be something here, you know.
Yeah.
What a clever idea. Is this? They say this one is ready to go.
This is a work in progress
Oh, I
demo.
see.
So you
It
can
does have a
try out what they've
download,
got so
yeah.
far. Yeah.
Very good.
Um,
Good. That's a good find, Boat. Well done, Neil, over there. He always finds the good stuff.
Yeah. And one more, Aaron. This is one of our most look forward to games coming out on the Amiga. This is Ami Hero. Now, I can't
Oh,
remember.
yeah.
Have you played this one yet already?
Oh gosh, I don't remember, Boat. If I've tried this one yet, I don't. It seems like I have not, but if I have,
Mhm.
it seems like I remember it because I do love Hero a ton.
Yeah, this is
And
the
so this
Amiga.
looks
This is
good.
a port of the classic game Hero. It's not really a port, it's sort of a reimagining of the old 2600 slash 8-bit Atari classic. The new update for this has better graphics, better sound and animation, more dynamite, and you can pause the game. So
I love
all
that.
essential.
I love that picture of it's the Amy Hero with this It's a close up. You never get to see the
Right.
guy up close. That's cool looking.
Mhm.
I like that.
Yeah. So anyway, check that out. That's another new Amiga game that we are blessed with here in 2024. And Aaron,
That's an all time
a- it-
classic too.
it's a short news week this week. That's all we got, man.
Well, I mean, what are you going to do? Sometimes you get the big news, and sometimes you get the little news. The big news, really, the two big news, as we talked about at the beginning of the show, Boatfest, which will be next weekend, and then, of course, your big jaunt over the pond. You know, of course, you're going over there to Rabbi's big event, but also Boat going to Europe. Here he goes, everybody. So if you got a score to settle, I mean, again, don't pull out your knife, but I mean, you know, like you need to talk. If you worked on the AGA chipset and you want to have a word with Boat, he will be ready to receive you.
All I've got to say is I've been working on my sprint, just in case I run into any of the bitmap guys. So.
I've seen your sprint. You're dead. You're going to die horribly, Boat.
All right, Aaron, what do we got coming up next week on the show?
Let's find out, Boat. Man, we're going to go Commando at Boatfest. It's
Hope
going to be
not. That's nasty.
Commando at Boatfest, Boat. What do you think about that?
You know, Commando is a game that I don't know. I know that I've heard people talk a lot about it. I know it was a very influential game. I don't know if I've ever sat down and played Commando before.
Really?
Yeah.
But you generally know what
I
you're
know what it
doing
is.
in
It's
it.
like Akari Warriors, one of those type of games.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I've played it on other systems. I'm not sure I've ever played the Amiga version of this. And I don't think this has ever came up before. Anytime I don't think we've ever streamed this, played it at an Amigathon or anything. I don't think we ever
So
have.
there you go. Check out our live stream of Boatfest, or check out ourselves in person at Boatfest to see us take on Commando. And hey, we're going to be reading, or we're going to have some people come up and read live reviews at Boatfest.
I like that.
So,
We're going to be reading. That's even better. We'll be
gonna
reading
do the
live
whole-
at Boatfest.
We're going to do the Andy Kaufman bit, where we're just going to
Oh,
open up
yeah,
a
get the
book
phone
and
book.
go.
I love it, Boat.
All right, guys. Thanks as always for watching. We will see you next time. And until then,
Adios.
Adios.
See you at Boatfest.
Amigos is made possible by contributions from listeners like you. Patreon supporters help choose the games we play, receive exclusive magnets, and get access to the Amigos Retro Gaming Discord server. Visit patreon.com/Amigos Podcast if you'd like to support the show and join our community.